Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a journey into the unknown. The energy that surrounds us presents Riding Through the Unknown with your host, Michael Hoff.
And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us, Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and joining me tonight is a guest that I have been looking forward to. We have talked on Messenger, so I'm grateful to finally be able to talk face to face with the one, the only, Penny Bradley.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to come on. So, for those who haven't maybe come across you yet, which I'm sure there's a few still out there, could you tell us a little bit about your background and your involvement in what you're going to be talking about?
Uh, yeah. Um, I was born in 1955, and military laboratories, which I guess is now what they call DARPA, had used early CRISPR tech on a bunch of us and had added etDNA so that we would have psionic abilities that normals don't. And because they did this before I was born, they thought they owned me outright like a truck. When I was 4, they came and picked up their truck. A couple of men in green fatigues showed up at my house with a Korean War era Jeep, and I was not the only child they picked up. They picked up other kids from other families, and we had a pretty full Jeep as we were driving from Central California cross country to Langley. They left us at Langley Air Force Base. There's a building there that used to be a hospital. It's not the CIA building. That wasn't built yet then in 1959 when I was 4 years old. I was placed in room number 7, and that became my name for the rest of the time I was there. So I was number 7. They would yell 7, and that would be me. I would be expected to answer. I was not taught to read or write. I spent the first year and a half being mind fractured. That's a difficult thing to describe. You have to be in a position where the child has to choose if they want to live or not. And if they choose to live, they'll create a bubble around the memory of what's being done to them. And later on, that bubble can be formed into a new personality. This is induced dissociative identity disorder. And it was done to me on purpose. They created a 13 by 13 by 13 hierarchical array of altars by torturing my 4-year-old self. Most of that torture was sexual. It was rape by adult men. And there was no affection to it. It was, they would come in, they'd have a clipboard, and whatever was next on the list was what they did. And they were very actually clinical about it. I don't know how they pulled it off. But it was sheer torture from my point of view. I was a very small 4-year-old. And after about a year and a half, they sent me to Montauk at Camp Hero with some other children. There were 4 of us when we left and 2 of us when we came back. The others died there. In those days, if you went to space, you went through Montauk first. They had to know what you did in the chair. When I got back to Langley, they started training my alters. They already had contracts for alters and tissue samples for me to be used by other agencies. So if you do the math, a 13 cube is just shy of 2,200. So they had that many versions of me to work with. And they would train each one with a set of codes to wake up, do your job, whatever your job was, to report to your boss, or as they call it, debrief, to remember everything that altar had done if it hadn't been activated for a while. And there was a code to make you self-destruct, and there was another code to make you go back to sleep. That's how I remember all this, is because in 2013, my remember code was used on my first altar that served in space. So this was a complete memory download all at once. When I was 9, the survivors of Langley were sent through a jump gate to Mars, Miles Klima. It was where the Germans had their base there. And the 20 of us were turned over to the Germans. The Germans didn't want idiots. So they put us in Schule with their own kids. Schule is German school. It's taught differently than it is here in the United States. It's taught Prussian style. You say everything out loud. You say it wrong, you get slapped with a ruler. we learned German, but not Hochdeutsch. We learned Schwabish, which in Germany today, Schwabish is considered a hillbilly language. About like my grandpa's Ozark is considered, my grandpa's Ozark accent is considered hillbilly here. But um, on Mars, I was taught their culture, their beliefs, their literature, the way the space Germans teach science. I was taught extraterrestrials and how to survive among them. I was taught my job, which for me, I was a fighter pilot while I was on Mars. I was part of a unit of American women who served with the Germans on Mars, flying, here we'd call it near Earth orbit. And we had computers in the ships that would monitor what was below us. So we had assignments. You were supposed to find the Mars raptor nests. And if they were small, take them out. If they were larger, get back up to take them out, because we were at war with them. And we were supposed to monitor the Mars native mantids, which were a lot like ants, 9-foot tall ants, if you can, except where Earth ants have that narrow little space in their thorax to abdomen, their tiny little wasp waist.
Right.
They didn't. So, as military and knowing the way military operates, we called the raptors lizzies, and we called the ants, we called them bugs. So when we would go out into battle, it would be against the lizzies or against the bugs. And these are standard military dehumanizing the enemy. The war was over in 1990 Earth time, and I was shipped out to the German military in space and placed as a navigator on a freighter ship. That particular trip, I did 25 years on Mars and 25 years in space. I have done hundreds, if not thousands, of trips. They used to come for me every Friday for decades. I would wake up with a cover memory. And in my case, it was a mermaid in a kelp bed. And I learned the technique of getting past the cover memories because I knew I could not possibly have been a mermaid every week. But it was every Friday night I would dream the same thing. So I learned self-hypnosis in the 80s, and I use that. I go into a light trance. I ask my subconscious to pull away the curtains, to open them up, and show me what really happened. And it's usually very, very different. It's usually somewhat hostile, dangerous, threatening, and it's rarely on Earth. I do have alters who operate for agencies on Earth. I don't discuss them because what they do is highly classified still, and they will kill me. And if not, the people they're targeting will. So Yeah, I'm more afraid of those people than I am the CIA.
Oh, no doubt.
So, but yeah, I came back. My They put me on the front porch instead of in my bed. They had my pajamas on me inside out. I didn't speak English anymore. My parents were young. Um, my mom would have been 20, 21. My dad, 3 years older. And they didn't believe in amnesia. They sure didn't believe in abductions. And when I came home and I was speaking German instead of English, and I didn't know who they were because I'd been mind wiped, they didn't believe it. And 3 or 4 months later, when I told my kindergarten teacher that the Martians had left me on the doorstep, she told my mom about beat me to death for making things up. So I've been telling the basics since I was 5. So this is not a new story for me. I have known weird things happen to me and around me my whole life. So there's a lot of us out there too. Most of us keep quiet. Um,
I'm curious with your travels and, everything in space. Do you ever, like, when you're looking at random videos or somebody sends you a request, like a friend request, and go, I know them, and recognize them from the programs? Or are we like totally different from what our alters look like?
I don't recognize faces. People have asked me, "Do you remember me?" I don't know. I recognize your energy, if I recognize you at all. When I first heard Joseph Powell on uh, Zan John's show, I knew him. I couldn't place where, but I knew him. When I first heard Arkim Ra, I knew him. I didn't know from where. Um, both of them remember me from places I don't remember being. And I give them credit that, yeah, they remember me, but I don't, so I don't talk about the story. It's not my story. Um, there are others that I just don't remember them at all. They're, it's like, I don't know who you are. Um, and they're actually hurt because they say they were really close to me at the time, and I'm like, the mind wipe is good with you. you know so I'm not mean to those people, but if I don't remember you, I don't remember.
Right. And
I
I'm wondering if, because I've seen like picture, like somebody will put a picture up and I'm like, I know that person, but that picture is from like say the 60s, and I'm like, I was born in the late 70s, so there's no way I could know that picture
Oh yes, there
person.
is. There's time travel in these programs. Anytime you have hyperspace drive, you have time travel. And the public hasn't wrapped their heads around that yet. But if traveling through hyperspace requires time as well as the different angles of everybody knows that there's the X, which is the flat, the Y that is straight up. So with them you have a flat plane, and then you have the Z axis that comes out of it.
Right.
okay, you also have the time element, which is not linear at all. And it changes a lot depending on the magnetism of the planet or star you're going around. And so you're dealing with a space physics that people on Earth are still saying, "Oh, well, we can go from point A to point B, and we can go in a straight line, but it takes time to get there, and you can't go backwards." No, time is a river. You're on the bank of the river. You step into that river, and you can go back on the bank anytime you want, forward or backwards. It's easier to go forward, but it's possible to go backwards. Every time a ship goes into hyperdrive, it's a time machine.
I'm kind of wondering because I know they've been around for centuries, but they garnered awareness in the 80s with Nelson Mandela. And I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, the Mandela effect. Is that like us going back and altering something and the new timeline comes in, or and we're like the only ones that recognize it because of what we do?
There were approximately 22 timeline splinters. They were not separate timelines, they were splinters of one. And all of them were destroyed by different reasons. All of them. Nuclear war, biological war, asteroids, all kinds of things. All 22 of them. And the Time Core took all of them and blended them into the next one that was not destroyed. That's why you're getting so many of these stories, is because it was 22 splits. Now, one of the horrible things is that if you had a wife or child or husband or parent that was in that splinter, and there wasn't a person like that in this one, that person disappeared. So the stories of where did my spouse go, those are real too. The Time Core could not fix that problem. The assumption was made that saving the majority was preferable to losing them all. And yeah, the Time Core is real. I know several folks who are in it. We have found each other here. And yeah, I'm part of the Time Core.
So I'm kind of curious with your story. You know, you say you started out as a fighter pilot, then became freighter. Was that by your choice, or that was just all of a sudden your altar had a new assignment and you're like, okay, I'm now working on a freighter?
I got in trouble on Mars. This sounds immoral by American standards, so I haven't talked about it a lot. And folks tend to understand it, write it into how they understand life. Okay? In the German space programs, you are encouraged to have a sex partner, a regular outlet for sex. Not because they want us to be happy, but because we're more productive that way. Now, I had one of those people in my life. We were the equivalent of married for 20 years. Uh, he had been at Langley with me. He was number 5. And I was sent on a raptor nest mission. And my scanner showed him being dinner for a nest of raptors. They were eating him alive. And I panicked, and the ship's computer interpreted that panic as fire all weapons. Well, the German command were able to time travel and get all the humans out of the nest before that happened. But the decision was made that I was not to be trusted with those kinds of weapons again. And when I've talked about this story in the past, some unscrupulous interviewers have decided it was some sort of a love story. It, I did care about the man, and we were together a long time. But this incident, the German High Command decided that it would be better for everyone if we were separated. And since I was at fault, I was put on a ship off-world. This was considered punishment because the navigator is chipped into the ship's computer and becomes a security risk. So I was never again allowed off the ship until it was time to go home. I was kept in the central part of the ship where navigation, the bridge, the officer's mess, and my quarters were. I was never allowed anywhere else because if there had been someone with telepathic abilities, they could have accessed the ship's computer through me. So I was housebound. I could go to work, I could stay in my room, I could go eat. That was it.
So I'm curious, did you get...
For the next 25 years, I was a house prisoner.
I'm curious if you were able to maintain like memories of the weapons and how they worked in case of an emergency, or did they wipe that out and just say, this is you now?
They wiped out everything and said, this is you now. Except when I came home, I was returned to age 4, but I spoke German instead of English, and my parents were very angry about that. And when I was 6, my dad had a 30-06 that he had behind the front door. And I took it apart and cleaned it and oiled it and put it back together right in front of him. And he completely freaked out because there was no way I should have known how to do that. And yet I had been military in space. But he didn't know that. And when I talked about it, he called me a liar and beat me. So my parents were very much, their reality was all there really was, and anything else was a lie. So this was how I grew up, that my memories were lies. That's what they called them.
Right. And my understanding from talking to a lot of people who've gone through the program, like you're saying, the 25 and back, in Earth time, it's like 5 minutes. That we lived 25 years. Was that your experience?
I was an adult in space, and I was put back to being a child. I was put back to being that 4-year-old tiny child. And the memories, there were hazy, filtered things. I really didn't remember most of it until the activation code was used on me, and that was in 2013. So I went from 1959 to 2013. I didn't know what these things were. And there's a lot of people out there that are like that. And very few of us are activated by code. Most of us, it's, what was it Tony said? He got ink from a tattoo, and then he went and had MRI, and the combination revived his memories. Most of us don't know what's going on. We just know we have nightmares of things that aren't possible on Earth, and we have abilities that most people don't have, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't because the agencies tried to put in firewalls. I finally gotten past the firewalls on most of my abilities. The ones that I haven't wanted to because they're so dangerous. I don't even want to access them. I did things out there that I don't want to do here.
Right, I totally understand that. And so I'm wondering, because you were navigation and everything, if dignitaries or other races representatives came on board, did they ever come through your area, or was your area completely sealed off totally from everybody?
Most navigators out there are ET. Even with the early CRISPR tech, they didn't get a navigator every time. It's very few of us. I've been interviewing people for 5 years. I've been public for 7 or 8. And I've only run across 5 of us. It's not a common ability. Most of the navigators are either Draco or Zeta. And so you're working with those folks day by day. Some captains have a real problem with the Draco. And Draco are not monsters. They're not demons. They're... what are they like? Draco are like Worf on Star Trek. They have honor. You don't step on their toes or they get mad. And they're strong. They'll knock you across the room. They're 3 times as big as we are. They have powerful minds. But once you get past their racial bias, because they're not fond of us any more than most of us are fond of them. But once you get past that, they have a really bawdy sense of humor. They drink. They talk sex. I've never seen one eat another human being. I know a lot of the folks out there do, but I never acted like I was their inferior. So if you act like a slave, they will treat you as a slave. And I never did. I was their equal. I was doing the same job they were. So I had a different experience of them than other people do because of that.
All right. I'm kind of curious because I personally am slowly learning my roles in all of this. And when I'm driving, there are times like I will put my hand to where my wrist is on the gear shift, and it feels like I'm punching in codes into the car, or my hand will like start to tilt certain ways, and it's like I feel like the car is moving that way. Is that kind of similar to like what you were experiencing as like navigator, where you would be punching in numbers like on a pad or coordinates, or
I was chipped into the computer and there was no. Okay, the first ship, the fighter pilot ship, had mouse pads. One was for pitching yaw, and the other one was for weapons. But once I got into an actual ship, all of it was mental. I would visualize where we were supposed to go. I was basically one with the ship, where the skin of the ship was my skin. And I could see 360 degrees around the ship. I could see the space critters that were coming to feed off the ship's energy. And it was a matter of brushing them off. I don't know how the computer interpreted it, but as I felt I was brushing them off with my hand, they would disappear. So I don't know what the ship did with it, but it was a very organic interaction. So while I was on duty, I was the ship. And it's difficult to explain that in any other way. It's almost like when you're driving and you become one with the car. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I mean, I live up in the Sierras and I would drive and go down these roads that other people were terrified of. You go more than 40 and you go off the edge. That's the kind of roads. And, I would get into the zone. Well, when you're the navigator of the ship, you're chipped into the ship and it's the zone. I mean, you just do it. And then you get some crazy commanding officer who wants to tell you all this crap and you have to go here, you have to go there, you have to go the other place, and you're like, oh, you're not going to like that place. And they're like, I said go. So yeah, I was a lieutenant. I wasn't a top boss. I was a flunky. I may have been an officer, but I was still a flunky, and I knew it. So I had orders to follow and things that were expected of me. And because I was in the German fleet and they expected certain job positions to use black goo, which black goo is a sentient AI that is very dangerous. It changes the way your mind operates, but it makes you smarter. And when you're having to deal with operating a ship through hyperspace and making sure that all of the people are not in the walls and floors when you come out, then you need that extra brain power.
So I'm wondering, like you were saying, you had some officers that, were a little, less friendly. Whenever they would say, like, oh, we need to get over to this point, get us there now. Did you ever be like, okay, I'll take the slower route? Or be like, oh, you want to get there now? And be like, okay, I'll get you there now. And like, make it faster than they expect and then make them like stumble when you drop out?
I took extreme pride in my job. I tend to be a perfectionist personality wise, and I took pride in my job. And I was not going to let a rude, insulting commanding officer take that from me. I did my job perfectly.
You're better than me.
There was there was one commanding officer, and I've interviewed him, and he admitted that I was completely justified doing this to him, that the way his alter treated me deserved it. But he had been sexually harassing me the whole time we'd been on the ship. And I kept telling him no. And one day he ordered me to service 4 of the sadists on board. And these were men that were noted for putting their partners in hospital. And I decided I'd had enough. And I used my psi ability. And I have this ability there. I haven't tried it here, so I don't know if I have it here or not. I haven't wanted to know that I did here. But there, I heated up the cerebral spinal fluid in the center of his brain. You know, where your pineal gland sits in a pool of fluid.
Right.
I heated that up to the point that it exploded his brain. Exploded his head. And then I picked him up and I tossed him into regen, because my point was not to kill him. My point was to make him respect me. When he got out, he tied a rope around me and tossed me out the airlock. And once he knew I was dead, he pulled me back in, tossed me into regen, and as soon as I was okay, he repeated it. He repeated it over and over for 8 months. But every time he had to look me in the eyes, he was terrified. So, the man here says that yes, I was justified doing that. The man there, he'd probably put me out the airlock again, because he's just that kind of selfish creep. But we got captured by the military-industrial complex because of something stupid he did, and I was able to escape with some help from friends, and he chose to not go with us, so he's no longer my commanding officer.
So I find it interesting that, and I'm not sure, time-wise, how much time we had to get to this, but we always hear about the black ops here on Earth that the military is doing. And I found it interesting when I was talking with Arkeem, Ra, and some others that you're aware of the SSP Black Ops, and I figured the SSP alone is the Black Ops, but it sounds like there's even more Black Ops within the Black Op. Is that your take on it?
My take on it is that there are at least 6 competing factions that started off not even knowing about each other. They are using different technologies. because the groups that mind fractured us sold different alters to different people, you have assets that are working for all of them. And when you work for Monarch, Monarch is, they started off being sex slaves and then went into political subterfuge, political spying. They also do industrial spying. But they shoot up their people with black goo. And they have programming to not like people from Kruger. Kruger is where they got the idea for, I can't think of the name of them, the Borg. Because Kruger will cut off your hand and replace it with a gun. Kruger will add chips all over your face. There is a human underneath, but it's really hard to see them. And so Kruger and Monarch assets are programmed to hate each other. And they operate very differently, but they're using the same people. And then you have the Germans, who, because they actually won World War II in Antarctica, they have first dibs on all the assets. So if you meet their criteria, they will keep you and over and over and over and over and over. And if you're really good, they will tell you, you're too valuable to us. So when you die on Earth, we're going to come get you and we're going to regenerate you and you're going to live with us as long as you can be regened. That was meant to be reassuring. Now, we've also got the military industrial complex, and it goes by various different names: ICC, Alliance, Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. My friend Ileana calls them planetary corporations. Those are all the military industrial complex. There's about 150 companies, and they are constantly infighting amongst themselves as to who's going to be boss. But together, they run the biggest program now. And they are trying to take World War II back to the Germans. Then you also have Solar Warden. And it's basically the police of the solar system, except that they're constantly hassling ETs all over the place. It doesn't matter if the ET was here first, they're going to hassle them because they're not humans from Earth. And they vivisect people. So you're out in space and you've got this ally that you've been working with for 100 years. And Solar Warden shows up and they pick this guy up and they're vivisecting him. And you get a telepathic scream. Now, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to blow up that ship and all the humans on it to get to the one guy? Yeah, what are you supposed to do? Yeah. And so Solar Warden doesn't acknowledge that anyone else exists, but they are pretty much stuck in the solar system. And then you've got the guys that used to be the Coast Guard for Earth. They used to be called, Earth Defense Force, and now they're Space Force. I respect those guys because they knew what they were signing up for, and they have been keeping the secrecy lid on it all this time, fully aware of what's going on. Everybody else has been kidnapped to work for these people. So, Space Force, I respect. They're real heroes. They are protecting us from the bad guys that are out there. There are lots of bad guys out there, and Space Force is part of why they're not here. Another reason they're not here is because humans on Earth are considered to be a child race. And the galaxy has a government. No, it's not the Galactic Federation of Light. That was made up by the CIA and put through V2K, and it's a distraction. The real government calls itself the Galactic Authority, and they have a military police force called the Guardians, and the Guardians are who is making sure nobody kills humans on Earth. And to be honest, if they show up in our sky, we're in trouble. But they are who has a base on Saturn. So when the esoteric connects Saturn with authority, it's because the military police of the galaxy have a base there. It's not because it's evil.
Right. Are you aware of any like MK Ultra or Deltas or the secret, or not secret, the what's the word I'm looking for? Super soldiers being allowed with the Guardians on Saturn, or are they totally against the programmees?
The Guardians want nothing to do with the super soldiers. They consider us an abomination. Seriously, we go out into space, we create havoc for them to have to clean up, we destroy worlds, we capture prisoners, we turn them into cyborgs, we sell them into slavery with other ETs in exchange for what are de facto broken toys, because nobody out there is allowed to sell us anything that will advance us. They're only allowed to give us toys. So this is what's going on out there. We're literally killing off our own people and sending them as robots out into space for toys. And the Galactic Authority is getting tired of this. So, my understanding is that all of these space forces out there are being sent back to the solar system inside the Oort cloud. And they started with the Germans because they're the furthest out. And they're just pushing us all back in. And Gina Hill has a YouTube where that she has a middle name that I can't remember, but it's Gina Hill. And she has been photographing ships coming out of the sun. Those are German and Draco ships bringing survivors from German colonies back to the solar system. And before everybody freaks out that these are Germans, remember these are human beings who originally came from Earth. They're us. Whether you speak English or German or Japanese or whatever, they're us. And it's time for us to outgrow World War II and our religious and ethnic prejudices and realize all of humanity is one people. All of us. There's less difference between all of humanity than there is between a single family of chimpanzees. And we're killing each other over those differences. Why? Where did we get this idea that we need to kill each other? I mean, as we speak, there's a religious war going on in the Middle East that's including genocide on all sides. They think it's okay to kill babies. Both sides are doing it. So where did we get this okay? This idea that this was okay?
I wish I knew, because I would definitely go and time travel and change that one over to no, it's not okay.
I don't think it's okay, and I hope that sane heads prevail, but I'm not seeing it. And it's it. After being out in space and considering a Draco to be my coworker and Zetas to be my coworkers, how can I hold anything against another human? Of any language, religion, or skin color. We're all people.
Right. And I know we're getting close to the hour, so I don't know if you're okay to run a little bit longer or if you need to stick to the hour.
I can go a little bit over.
Okay.
I'm used to doing 2-hour shows.
Okay, well, I haven't gotten quite there yet, but I'm sure I will be soon. But so we mentioned the Space Force and how they're coming in and kind of legitimatizing everything and bringing an end, hopefully, to the abductions of children and being put through what we did and being fractured and everything. My question, though, is what are their plans to do with the super soldiers that are already done? Do they plan on, utilizing us to keep things going, or are they going to say, you guys are done, we're flipping you off, go enjoy the rest of your life?
I think their intention was to flip us off until they needed us. I think that was their intention. That those of us who remember anything were an oops, their systems failed. Uh, Except me, and I was activated on purpose by an NSA group. They were part of the Russian desk out of um, Fort Meade, Maryland. And they deliberately activated me using my Remember code from 1959. And unfortunately, the team members that I interacted with were both killed in 2016, and they had not bothered to tell me why. Uh, they did teach me how to be a dissident and not be arrested. And I've been walking that line very tightly.
Right. I can totally get behind that. And I'm wondering, too, those, like somebody was reading me for my involvement in the programs, and they said I somehow fractured the programming. Are our codes written down in a file somewhere, and
Yes.
do we know where those are, or is that some?
They're in the CIA archive computer in Washington D.C. But accessing them will take an act of Congress.
And we all know how long Congress takes.
We all know that Congress is having trouble believing that any of this is real. There are a couple of Congress critters who have made that leap, but the majority, no.
Right. And so I'm also wondering, are we fracturing and breaking free with help from them who fractured us, or the Space Force maybe? and they're helping us break free, or are we just learning from ourselves like you did self hypnosis to remember? Is our minds just becoming so strong and powerful right now with the energies going on that we're able to break it and start to remember on our own?
I think we've reached a tipping point where more and more people are going to remember on their own. But you have to remember these people meant for the memory blocks to be permanent. They did not intend for us to remember any of it. They wanted us to disappear into the population until they called us up. Now, when I first came public, there was a woman out there on YouTube that was saying that we were a standing army just waiting to be activated by a code word. And I have not found anything to prove her wrong. And that worries me because there are at least 1 million of us worldwide. And it's not just the United States. There are folks in Russia and China and the Middle East. And the ones in the Middle East, the women especially, are just tormented for this. They're not allowed to talk at all. I've had them talk to me 2 or 3 times in Messenger, and then they're offline. Can't find them again.
So it's starting to sound like what's the difference between, say, a Manchurian candidate and us in the programs? Is there
Nothing.
a difference?
There's not a difference. That's what we were designed to be. And when you look through the literature in the 1950s that's been declassified, it's very clear. They were looking for Manchurian candidates, and that's what they considered us. They wanted alters that did not share memory, that could be trained to do things that were illegal and immoral, and that the main personality wouldn't remember, that you could pass a polygraph because you honestly didn't remember. Now, when you look at some of these folks that have committed great crimes, I can't remember the guy's name, but he did the shooting in the Colorado theater. You see the confused look in his face. He had no idea he'd just killed people.
Right.
He had absolutely no idea. This is what they were looking for to create. This was their goal. Now, the difference between super soldiers and SSP is basically that super soldiers are ground thumpers and SSP are officers. That's your main difference.
Okay. And the other reason why I ask about breaking the code and breaking all the blocks is, for me, I feel like it started when I was watching Star Wars. It's like I would start getting memories and I'd start to feel like, everything they were doing I could do. And it's like, wait a minute. And it's like I'd start to have flashes of memories. And I'm like, that's why I was wondering, is someone hacked the program and is creating programs that are waking us up, so to speak?
Now,
And
in 1980, there was a new program that was rolled out on the public. It's called V2K. It is now. In those days, it was voice of God technology. It was used in warfare in the Kuwaiti War. That was why the Iraqi soldiers laid down their weapons and surrendered, was because they heard Allah in their heads telling them to.
right,
So this technology is based on something called the Frey effect, Frey. And its microwave frequencies hit the nerves and bones in your inner ear, and it's just loud enough for the brain to perceive it as its own thoughts. And so you can't trust anything that's been channeled since then, because this has just, it started off with the HARP technology in Alaska, and each time there was a new HARP facility, they expanded their base. And now it's being run out of Antarctica in the ice cube neutrino detector array. And if you want to hear about that, Eric J. Hecker has done a whole series of interviews about it, and he has testified before Congress about it. And this particular thing was run by Raytheon. And since he testified, Raytheon changed their name.
Really?
So, really, they didn't want to be affiliated with that. But I've seen articles where they're planning on enlarging this facility to 8 times the size it is now. It's not just passively sitting back looking for neutrinos. It's a two-way communication system, faster than light, and goes into space. It is a weather control device. It runs the V2K program. It is an earthquake generation device. And not only do we know it was used for that in 2011, but we have found emails on WikiLeaks where Mrs. Clinton, who was then Secretary of State, says yes, and it's on time. So we know its use was planned. It's a weapon, and it's being used for mind control of the population, the entire population. Once they get this thing to 8 times the size it is now, they're going to be able to control the entire planet through it.
So, when you're saying like the earthquake and all that, is that where the weather wars is coming from as well? Or is
Yes.
that okay?
Yes, it's from the weather wars. It caused the earthquakes in Turkey that killed 50,000 people. It caused the earthquakes in Japan that took out Fukushima. It caused the earthquakes in New Zealand that basically decimated Christchurch. This is a nasty, nasty, nasty weapon of mass destruction, and is sitting down there at South Pole Station. And it's not even classified. You can look it up on Google.
Boy, that's like the ultimate. It's right in front of your face, so you don't look for it.
Exactly. And you know, I've had Eric on my show several times, and this is why, is because he was the plumber that kept it running. He's a first-hand prime witness, prime source, primary source. And people who don't understand that, they're going, well, where's your links? He's the link. Okay, he had me to his house. My partner and I went to his house for a week, and he's got boxes and boxes and boxes of documentation. And we sat there just going through the documentation.
And the other thing that people need to understand is there's no paper trails.
There is a paper trail that he worked there, because that's what my partner Lou and I were going through while we were there, was his boxes of his paper trail.
Wow. Normally, like I know, like the MK Ultras and all those, you'd be lucky to find your name on a document.
Well, I interviewed the CIA Archivist from the DC office who uploaded my file to their computer. So I know for a fact there is a paper trail for me, but I don't have it in my hot little hands.
Right, and I doubt a Freedom of Information Act will get that to anybody anytime soon.
Probably not. We're back to an act of Congress to release those. But yeah, there's that's how I know where the files are, is because she uploaded them, and she was 85. She came on my show. She said, "Yeah, I uploaded," and we did a kind of a line by line what I remember, and she said whether it was on my file or not. There was one thing I remembered that wasn't in the file, and there were, I think, 3 things that I didn't remember that were. So she thought I was doing great.
So I have a friend who she's a dear friend of mine, and she asked this question of Brad Olson when he was on the show. And with your information around the weather wars and HARP and all of that and DARPA, the question was, when we turn off all of this that they're doing to manipulate the Earth, how long do you think it'll take the Earth to reset itself back to where it's supposed to be, free of the manipulation?
I don't know.
Is it
It,
even possible?
at this point, I think Earth would figure it out, but I don't know how long it would take. We don't even have a Gulf Stream anymore. We have had weather manipulation in one form or another since the late 70s. And at this point, it's completely controlled. The first time that I watched a weather report and I could see the weather control in your face was when Hurricane Katrina made a square corner out in the ocean, so that it was aimed directly at New Orleans.
Right, and you can't help wonder why they're targeting specific areas. What's hidden there?
They're targeting places where they put out more money than they get back. They are targeting, oh God, that would be a whole show by itself. And there is currently a genocide going on to eliminate the Rh positive people. And so they're going by the places that have the least income, the most output first. And they're taking control of resources and testing the ability to remove weaponry and see just how compliant these people will be when they're absolutely without hope. If they're going to go primal and shoot everybody that comes to the door, or if they're going to allow themselves to be put in a place where there are no resources, like what happened with when they were put into the dome and left without food or water, and so many of them died. Um, they're testing to see what will happen, and
So
it's not a fun thing.
no, and I'm wondering if Space Force was created, like you're saying, to help with all of this and bring an end to it. Are like an example is Hawaii recently had a direct energy weapon attack.
Mhm.
Why didn't they stop it? Why would they allow that to happen? What's
Because that
their
was an Air Force project. You have to start paying attention to what the different agencies are posting online. You look for the Club of Rome. They've been talking about depopulation of the poor folk since the 1970s. You have to look at the United Nations agendas, Agenda 21 and now Agenda 2030, what they actually say. And when they say depopulation, they mean killing people. When they say 15-minute cities, that means burning out what's already there to replace it with 15-minute cities. In California, they've been going through, because I live in Northern California, not in a city. I live in the country where we have forests, and we keep being burnt out because they have huge swaths that are zoned for no humans. And yet we've got people living there. So yeah, they're going to burn down the forest to get rid of the humans. And they don't care if we die or not. The current policy is, if it's not a government building and you don't have a 50-foot clearance around your house, they're going to let it burn. And it has been that way since the 1980s.
It's just
the rest of the country goes, oh, it's California. Well, we don't care if they burn. And so they've been going through and systematically destroying resources in California so that they can have the kind of plan that they want. They want coastal cities where everybody's in a 15-minute city. They want Central Valley cities for what farming they're going to allow, and they want everything else clear of humans, period. And that's what they're planning for. And they've been working for it for 4 decades. And yet the rest of the country is saying, well, we'd be happy if California fell off into the ocean. Okay. Kind of nasty, but it's the way people feel. And in the meantime, they're testing out all their new toys on us.
Right, and which is why
disgusting. It's disgusting.
Why they allow it?
Because nobody has enough knowledge to know what's going on and enough power by themselves to stop it. And it requires public opinion saying, oh, hell no. And that's not happening. And I can verify all of this through news clippings, links, articles. The next thing that you need to look at is the World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab. He has much more power than you think he does. He has enforced on the European Union that they are now grinding up dried insects and adding it to their wheat flour, and it's in all of their wheat products. They are eating dried up bugs. And I had a link to a news article yesterday where Tyson Meats is purchasing a bug processing plant. Can you imagine Tyson Chicken adding bugs to their processed chicken?
No, and I can't imagine why people would even stand and say, okay, we're eating this now, this is our new diet, instead of saying, no, I'm not eating that. No.
Because they will burn out the people that say no.
Personally, I'd rather be burned out than eating bugs.
I would too, but it is what it is. And people are not listening to what these these folks are actually saying. If you take the time to read their websites, Club of Rome, United Nations agendas, World Economic Forum, those are the places you start. If you read those three, and then you go to foreign policy, it's the mouthpiece of the Council on Foreign Relations and tells the State Department what to do. You read those and you will know exactly, real time, what's going on in the world.
And what's even scarier is we haven't even gotten to the Vatican's involvement.
Oh, the Vatican's behind all of it. The Vatican has been killing people since it was founded. Okay, people think that the Vatican was founded by Peter. It wasn't. It was founded by Sylvester. And Sylvester was the Pope when Constantine the Great held the Nicene Council that decided what books were going into the Bible. And the two of them had this thing that they were going to accomplish a religion that would unite a dying empire and revitalize it and bring it back to power. Well, what ended up happening was the Vatican took the power. And later on, they did the doctrine of discovery that allowed the destruction of the rest of the world in the name of colonialism. So it's been 1,500 years of hell on earth because of the Vatican.
Yeah. And I'm curious your take with the Vatican and the Templars. Are you of the following of the Templars were standing up against the church and following the relics and following the esoterics, or are you of the ones that said the French church wanted to skip out on their debt, so they got the Pope convinced they were heretics and wiped them out?
Both. I'm from the Grail line. The Knights Templar are sworn to protect my family. So I see them as a military branch. I don't see them as evil per se. They know their mission and they do it. I don't see where they did anything wrong that they should have been excommunicated. The Baphomet that they worshipped was the Shroud of Turin. And it's now a holy relic that people come and pay homage to. So I have ancestors who were Templar temple masters. They had their kids before they joined the Templars. I have ancestors who were kings, some of whom gave sanctuary to the surviving Templars. I've looked at both sides of the story, and I really believe that most people are listening to the Vatican rather than looking at it objectively. Are they nice people? I don't know. Some of them are, some of them aren't, just like everybody else. I don't think they're any more evil than any other paramilitary group. Now, where I live, we have two paramilitary groups. One's Christian and one's Satanist, and the local sheriff's department steps off the curb and lets them pass, both sides. So I have this opinion of paramilitary are a dangerous breed. Now, does that mean they're inherently evil? Depends on what the individuals do, what the group is stating their goals are. So I've had more trouble trying to understand the Freemasons than the Knights Templar. Uh,
And the other thing that amazes me is like the church has said Judas was no longer the traitor, that they go, oh, he was following Jesus's instruction, but yet everybody will keep saying, oh, he's the traitor. And Mary Magdalene,
the Bible says he was the traitor, and the Bible says that the wedding of Canaan was Jesus and Mary Magdalene. So she was actually his wife. She was not a prostitute.
right? And it amazes me how many people will say, well, the church told me this. And I go, well, you realize the church changed its platform and Mary Magdalene is no longer this. Oh, no, no, she's still this. I'm like,
Really?
are you serious right now?
Yeah, they're serious. They get something in their head, and that's. I mean, this sounds crude, but some people you cannot change their mind even with a baseball bat.
Yeah, they need the cosmic 12 by 6s that we were given.
Yeah, that would do it. Yeah, maybe. I know a lot of people who have it so stuck in their heads that the reality here on earth is the only reality, and what their pastor has told them is the only truth, or their imam, or their rabbi, or their guru. It's not just one faith. It's any group that has an organized structure with a guy at the top. And there's a few of them that it's a woman at the top, but not very many. Most of the time, if it's religion, it's a man at the top, and if there's a woman that has power, she's labeled a witch. Or
Right.
a
I feel like when America was being formed from coast to coast, that was their biggest threat was all the tribes that were here were matriarchal.
hmm
And what did we do to them? We pretty much almost wiped them all out.
the white folk did their best to completely eliminate them so that there would not be any descendants to take the land back. That was on purpose. Uh, that was completely on purpose. And the doctrine of discovery was a papal bull that justified it, said that if you came into a country, a new land, and all of the inhabitants were not Christian, that you had the right to clear them out and take their stuff without sin. And that was the Pope said that at the time. That was in 1499. They recently pulled the rug out from under that, which I don't know how that's going to affect America because all of our property rights are still based on that. And so now that you've got the tribes saying, well, that has been pulled out, so we want our land back. And they have treaties going back hundreds of years. So, are those legal documents going to be allowed to stand? If not, why not? So, there's going to be some changes, and a lot of people are not going to be happy about it.
I know one state, the state I live in, Texas, when we joined the U.S., we had land that bordered Canada, and our border to the west was the Pacific Ocean. And so it's like you're saying, if we get returned to our original land rights, California, Arizona, New Mexico are all going to become Texas.
Nope. California belonged to Mexico. Separately.
I actually found a map of the Republic of Texas, and it shows California being a part of the Republic of Texas.
Well, at that time, California thought it belonged to Mexico. So your Texans were doing a land grab.
Well, our Texans were Americans that were coming in to steal the state. So, yeah, we technically still would be Mexico.
Yeah. So where I live, there was a Spanish land grant to the Amador family, and they owned what are now 4 counties from El Dorado down through Tuolumne County. So, yeah. In Texas terms, that would be about 150 miles of territory, north to south.
Right.
California is 700 miles north to south. A lot of folks back east don't know that. And I'm kind of in the middle.
And I'm like, I can't help wonder, not only is our political system going to be undone, our, certain amendments, it's like, everyone's like so excited to go back to before, corporate America, so to speak. And I remind them, like, one important thing was, if we go back to pre-corporate America, women lose the right to vote because that amendment passed under the corporate America.
Well, since the corporate stuff started after the Civil War, you're going to have a whole lot of other stuff. And I really don't want to argue about who gets the right to vote, because at the point we are now, nobody's vote counts.
Right. Until we get that fixed. Yeah, it doesn't matter who has the right.
And until voting matters, the whole question is moot. And I see no reason to add gender discrimination into the mess. In space, women are mistreated. Generally, we are expected to work as a man beside the men and still sexually service them. So we are slaves. Even if you are an officer, you're still a slave. So I kind of have an attitude about that.
I do too, actually.
The man that I live with has been very reasonable, patient, kind, especially since I've been disabled most of the time we've been together. There have been times that I've had surgery that he had to take care of me like I was an infant, and he hasn't complained, not even once. And I am very grateful for him. I would not be here today if it were not for him. So I don't want to come off as man-hater, because I'm not. I had 2 really sucky husbands who were both violent, and that's the only reason that I haven't married Lou, is both of my legal husbands told lawyers and counselors that the marriage license was their pink slip on me, and that I was their property, and that if they chose to kill me, that it was within their rights. And I I don't ever intend to be property again. I'm a person. And if you can't accept that I'm a person, then I'm going to walk away. You know, like an old-fashioned Southern girl would hold the shotgun to your face and say, "Oh, hell no."
Right. I mean, that's a Southern custom that people don't think about, is because they say the plantation owner was the husband, and in actuality, it was the wife. She ran everything. She controlled the money. And it was
Well,
like,
not in my family. My grandfathers both controlled the money, and they treated my grandmothers like they were stupid. And one was from Oklahoma, and the other was from Arkansas. And the ones from Arkansas had indeed had a plantation. So, you know, it depends on the couple
right.
and what the woman's willing to tolerate. Well, having watched both of my grandmothers go to hell in a handcart when their husbands died, and watching my mother being unable to function when my father died, hell no, I ain't going to be that.
No, and
In my
applaud,
case, the body's falling apart, not the mind.
right, and I applaud you and everyone that I'm starting to learn and create connections with that are going through this, and being able to stand up and be like we are with everything we've gone through. It like, I feel like sometimes going, I don't know how I can be the happy go lucky, go with the flow person, learning what all I've been through. I feel like I should be the opposite. And like, it amazes me that we can rise up, choose, hey, we're not going to let this define us,
Um,
and break
I
free.
have I have times when I am angry, really deeply angry. Um, I have times when I'm going through questions in Messenger and I have tears running down my face uncontrollably. I am not a happy go lucky person, but I remember a lot more than most. Because of the way I was activated, I got a full lifetime's memories at once. Um, and even with the fact that things that happened over and over and over tend to blur, I still have a good 50% recall of a 55-year life. So I know what happened to me. I know what I was involved with. I know what I did. Now, I have other alters that I'm like moments in time, and others that I have like 10-15% of their memories. And I'm not sure what all they did. But that first one that was on Mars and then on a freighter ship, that one I remember. And it's not happy memories. I was not asked if I wanted to remember. Once they were dumped on me, I had to spend the time to find out what it was I was remembering, because this wasn't normal. And I've been called every name in the book ever since. So I would not have gone public. I was perfectly happy sitting in a Facebook group doing peer counseling with other people with memories, and then the CIA took it upon themselves to start shooting me with energy weapons. And that was when I went public. Because, as Bill Cooper put it, if you know they're going to kill you, You stand under the spotlight and you tell everybody why. Now, 4 years ago, I had surgery to repair my left shoulder because the CIA broke it. 2 years ago, I had surgery to repair my neck because my first husband had broken it. So I'm not in great shape. I'm not pretending to be in great shape. And I'm not hiding. I'm sitting here. If they want to kill me, they know where the hell I am. But now, if they kill me, everyone will know why.
Right, which I think is the important thing of why all of a sudden you're starting to hear more people like you, Tony, Arkeem, who've been through the program and have the memories coming forward because,
Well,
yeah, they're leading the way for others.
Tony and I came public at the same time. We knew each other. That group I talked about that I was doing peer counseling, we were both admins in that group together when we came public, 2016. It's just my first interview was with Jay Campbell and his was with Michael Sala. That was the difference. And Michael Sala didn't want to talk to me because I served with the Germans. Period. He still doesn't want to talk to me because I served with the Germans. So it's been hard. Some of the things people have told me, because I was an American that was kidnapped as a child and then turned over to the Germans. They make assumptions about me. Because I was a truther, they make other assumptions about me. First of all, I'm not a conservative. That's probably the biggest assumption that people make, is that I'm either a conservative or a Nazi, and I'm neither. The next one is they assume I'm either Christian or New Age, and I'm not either of those either. I practice alchemy. It's an ancient religion. It's what New Age was actually based on. I'm middle of the road, leaning towards liberal. I'm what they used to call an Eisenhower Republican. Look up the Republican platform for 1952. You'll be shocked. It's more liberal than even the Democrats these days. And yet it was middle of the road Republican at the time. I haven't changed. The parties have.
Yeah, I think we have one party now, and they just call it two different names, so we feel like we have a two-party system.
Everybody elected to office these days is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Every damned one of them. So, if you want to know what official policy is for the United States, the magazine called Foreign Policy is their mouthpiece. It's $150 a year to subscribe. It will tell you everything that's going on. It's not like I'm magic and know automatically. I actually have sources that anybody can access. I've told you 4 or 5 websites. You just read. It's the information is out there in your face. You just have to look at it.
Wow, we went a lot longer than I thought we were going to go. I just looked at it. We're like Now we're 44 minutes.
It's okay. I guess I had more to say than I thought I did. But
No, and I appreciate what you're sharing, and I had talked. I'm gonna do the one thing I told you that I do backstage was full transparency. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing because you and I have not talked face to face before. And so I know this was a huge leap for you to entrust that, you know, is this going to be a good show to be on or not? And I thank you for trusting in me. And I hope I delivered the type of show that you are comfortable with. And
yeah,
I just,
I'm actually kind of surprised because this is the first time I've been on StreamYard where I had sound.
I know. I was just thinking that. I'm like, they'd never cut your mic.
No, they never cut my mic this time. So, okay.
No, and I do appreciate you sharing all the information you have. I know it's hard sometimes to share, and so I just want to say I am grateful and appreciative, and I'm learning a lot. And with this being kind of, we were talking about what is writing through the unknown. The goal was just to help people like you have a platform or a show where they can freely share their
Mhm.
knowledge, and when people are ready to listen to, they can find it and listen. But I'm also finding now is revealing stuff about myself, and I have to say you've given me a lot to think about. And like, I like how, though, too, as much as you're telling us what's really going on, you don't leave us in a hopeless state. That you do point out that there is still hope. And so I appreciate that.
The biggest thing that we need to do is stop fighting each other and start fighting the plan that's against us. We have to stop the genocide of humans, and we have to start seeing each other as the same species.
Right. And the one thing I'd like to point out about that, too, is we don't have to wait till we have 100% of humanity behind us to make that move,
No, we
because
don't.
chances are we probably never will honestly have 100% humanity backing. But
Yes, it doesn't take 100%. When the Americans revolted against Britain, at best they only had 5% of the population.
I love how you brought that up because that's exactly where I was going with that.
So, a lot of people out there don't study history. They're clueless. And it's like they were born into a brand new world. Well, I'm sorry, honey, it didn't happen that way. There have been people here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and the ones that were here 5,000 years ago were not any stupider than we are.
No, I think they kind of were smarter than we were.
I'm kind of seeing that too, that they were smarter than we are. But there was a recent study that they called it the 100th monkey effect. And it was when 100 monkeys on this one island figured out how, well, the beginning of the story is the scientist started feeding them a new food. It was raw yams. And over time, one by one, the children in the group, were starting to eat the yams. When it got to 100 monkeys were eating yams, suddenly all of them were. So, what I'm trying to do is make sure we get that 100th human to believe that this stuff is real and that it needs to be stopped.
Right. And the beauty of it is you or I could be the 100th person and would never know it.
Yeah.
And so don't sit there and think, oh, well, there's only 10 people I know that, believe this. So, we got a long way to go. You don't know where those 10 people are in that scenario. They could be
Yeah.
your
They
friend.
could, they could be the first 10 or they could be the last 10.
Right. And you're the one deciding one that'll tip the scales. So, never discount your own strength and your own belief in yourself because you never know. You could be the 100th, you could be the 99th, which helps the 100th come
Mm-hmm.
forward.
So, what I've been working toward is people convincing Congress that these black ops need to be stopped. There's nothing we do out there that cannot be done by consenting adults. There is no reason for children to be mind fractured and used as slave labor for the rest of their lives. There's none whatsoever. Now, I'm seeing some of the black ops are starting to use people under contract, and others are still using kids because I've been contacted. One was by a family in Texas. They were saying, my 4-year-old says he won't go back to sleep because he doesn't want to go into space again. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
ongoing. It's not something that stopped in the 1950s. It's ongoing. This I was contacted in I believe it was 2019 about that. This is ongoing. It's not something that stopped happening last century. This is now. It's still happening to babies in our country. So
Right. And
that's my big push. Even if they kill me, that's what I want you to take away is this shit is still happening to babies in our country. And it needs to stop. There's nothing that we do out there that cannot be done by consenting adults.
exactly. And it may even be done better with the consenting adults because as children, there's a breaking point. Even though they're fracturing us, there's still a breaking point. Whereas when they're consenting, their breaking point may be way further down than ours because they're aware. So we're
Yeah.
unaware.
They're in a solid one mind. They're not fractured. They're not broken. They're not already screwed up before they start. Their excuse they gave me all these many years ago was that adults go crazy when they're interacting with extraterrestrials. Well, we've had enough sci fi to get people used to the idea.
Right.
So that shouldn't be happening anymore.
No, and I mean, we even had the movie Contact, which isn't really classified as sci-fi. That I love Matthew McConaughey's line. It's one of the few movies that I actually will ever quote Matthew McConaughey. Is when he describes the universe, and he says, "If the universe is empty, it's an awful lot of wasted space."
Yeah.
And
So,
that's the one line of that whole movie. I'm like, that's the one thing I love about it because that's so true. It's like when people are like, there's nobody else in this universe but us. I'm like, well, then why did God create 9 planets? And yes, I'm saying 9 because I don't believe in Pluto being debunked as a planet, because I'm like, who are we to decide who a planet is and who isn't a planet?
Yeah. Well, I believe in the 10th planet.
I do too, and I feel like that's why they debunked and declassified Pluto as a dwarf planet, is so that number 10 would become 9, and it's like, it's still 10. You have 10 celestial, huge planetoid bodies. You can't erase one.
Yeah. Well, Pluto being in its screwed up orbit proves there has to be another one that came and pulled it off the planet that it was orbiting. So we're at close to 2 hours.
We are.
So I'm going to say thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on.
And thank you, audience, for listening.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. And so, as for this series goes, just a little housekeeping. This is the second episode of the month, so we will be back with this series next month. So stay tuned to the channel. I'll be making announcements of when the next episode airs and who will be on it. And thank you again, Penny. And I look forward to continue chatting with you on Messenger, because you share so much great information. And folks, you have no idea. We have just in this 2 hours hit the tip of the iceberg of what she can share. And so I just appreciate how much we got in. And I know there's so much more. So if ever you're willing to come back on, I would be more than happy to bring you back on.
Okay. I'll look forward to that.
All right. And with that, let me see, my mind just blinked out for a second. So with that, we are going to say good night. God bless everyone. And wherever you are in the world, have a blessed day, blessed evening, and a blessed afternoon. And we will sign off.